Measure and optimize flow. So how long does it take for something to fly from that end of the board to that end of the board? In this case, maybe the average lead time of 12 days. And that's useful for planning and for optimizing your process. You can discuss things like, what can we do to cut that in half? And explicit policies. So there are some examples of policies here. Can someone give me an example of policies that are visible in this wall? Process policies.
Work in progress limits.
Yeah, the limit here is a policy that we don't want to have more than 2 things at a time in the UAT step.
Phases.
Yeah, we've kind of assumed that there is some kind of a distinction between when development is done and UAT starts. There's some kind of clear distinction between there. We might even clarify that in the definition of done, right? Etc., etc. There may be all kinds of policies on board, but the idea is make them visible because you don't. In Scrum, you get a whole bunch by default. Here, you really don't. So here's an example of a board in the process of being evolved. And now these pictures are a bit dark, I realize that. But here's a daily meeting taking place in front of the board with the whole group of about 15 people. And here's a subsection of the group talking about their specific items. So just visiting a Kanban team looks a lot like visiting a Scrum team. You might see more people in front of the board. So if we're going to compare these things, I like calling these tools, and I know that not everybody agrees. But what I mean by tool is this definition from dictionary.com. Anything used as a means of accomplishing a task or purpose. Under that definition, I'm going to just take the liberty of calling Scrum and Kanban tools. Favorite? Fork?
Fork.
Where's the fork? Fork's a better tool. Oh, nice. We have a debate in my room. Comparing tools in that way is meaningless. Right? You need a context. So is this fork good or bad? Well, what am I trying to do with it? Am I trying to eat potatoes or brush my teeth? And compared to what, by the way? Maybe this thing is pretty good at brushing my teeth compared to a chainsaw. Relative. There may be cases where both these tools are lousy. I might want a spoon to eat the soup with it. So tools, physical tools, we have process tools. You might call them organizational patterns such as pair programming, visualizing the workflow, product owner role. These are the pieces of XP, right? Pieces of Scrum. They can be used in isolation. I don't remember seeing a single session with the word extreme programming or XP in it, this conference, but plenty of sessions mentioning things like test-driven development. Then there's the ideas. I call these thinking tools like Lean, Agile. It's pretty vague, mostly at an idea level, principle level. You can still see them as tools because they help you accomplish things. And then there's the containers or the frameworks, right? Like Scrum, container. And these containers, of course, refer to some ideas and also have some concrete practices. So this is just one way of looking at it. Now, when we're going to compare it, we should need to compare for our understanding. So we may very well compare a fork and a knife, but not to decide which one is better, but to learn more about both of them. So let's do that. So I've selected an axis here that I'm going to compare against. And you can, of course, choose all kinds of axes. I chose this one because it's fairly objective. And that is prescriptive versus adaptive. So prescriptive means lots of rules, and adaptive means no rules, or very few rules. So the Scrum is kind of in the middle. You might say Scrum is 9, maybe 10, right? Script certifications are going to start. Certification program is starting next week. XP is a bit bigger, right? There's more stuff in XP. XP contains most of Scrum, but also some engineering practices. Right? Scrum doesn't tell you anything about how to code. XP does. It's a bit bigger. Rob? I couldn't fit more. There's actually more. Lots of things. Configuration, audit findings. Now, I'm leaving it mean here because you're not supposed to be using all this. Right? It's a smorgasbord. It's a collection of things to choose from. So that's a major difference. Scrum is too small. You have to add stuff, right? I mean, we have to write code somewhere. How are we going to write code? How are we going to test? Scrum doesn't tell us, therefore we have to add stuff. Rup is too big. You're not supposed to have all that to choose a subset. Another big difference, though, is that in Scrum and Kanban, they evolve. You don't need to decide up front what additional practices, roles, etc. am I going to add. I might start by adding nothing. and then add things as we go along. So it's evolutionary process improvement. RUP has a big problem. That is configuring the process from the beginning. That's hard. It's not as much of the let's change the process as we go along. So a RUP process can be very agile. You can pretty much do XP or Scrum and still be doing RUP. But in practice, it seems like many RUP projects get into create themselves too big of a process. Nevertheless, if you look at this as toolkits, right? There's value in everything, depending on context. So here's a nice quote from Miyamoto Musashi, 17th century samurai. He managed to get old with all his limbs intact, and that wasn't typical for samurais in Japan during that period. So and he was good at combining techniques, multiple swords, etc. So he had a great quote, probably misquoted. I'll say it in Japanese. Do not develop on attachment. Fighting. Is that correct, Japanese? So don't love any of these. Find your combination. It's just important, however, Scrum, for example, is minimalistic. Right? You're not doing Scrum if you're not doing all of Scrum. So if you start moving stuff, then call it something else, Scrum-ish or Scrum-inspired or something. Otherwise, we cause confusion. So we might be having a team doing Scrum, we might be doing things like pair programming and test-driven development, continuous integration from here. They may be, they may put that little number there and actually follow it. We call it Kanban, right? They may measure and optimize flow. And they may be writing use cases, picking things from here that they like, etc. So configure your process. Experiment. So this is the way I see it, just a cloud and nice values and principles from Lean and Agile. And this common toolkit, Scrum toolkit, XP toolkit, just things you do. There's a lot of overlap as well. Can anyone guess what this one, I was thinking of when I put that one in there? Yeah, pretty much. Never mind the symbol itself, but the thing that would be in the middle that I was thinking was to focus on visualization. That seems to be a common denominator in all these three. Make things really visible kind of in your face. But never mind that. This is just a high-level picture. And there are, of course, other tools that contribute to these values but aren't specifically included in any of these. For example, value stream maps. Great tools, but they just happen to not be inside any of these containers. So we'll be doing a value stream map. Any tool can be misused. So here's a guy who just bought a new tool. New chainsaw. It was expensive. They said it was supposed to be good. What's he thinking right now, do you think? Not a very good tool. The old tool was better. This is very tiring, cutting down trees. It's heavy and packed. So don't blame the tool. Any tool can be misused if you don't actually start questioning your behavior. Right? New tool, new behavior. So that doesn't mean throw everything out you already had. Just be willing to question it. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to talk a bit more about Kanban. Then we're going to round off the whole thing by trying to do an objective comparison for understanding and not for judgment. So, Rick? What? you triggered an exercise, you know that. I don't know how this is going to work with so many people, but we'll just try our best. How about that? I've heard that exercises are good, so let's do an exercise. I call this a multitasking name game. And it's to illustrate exactly how badly you can try to do everything at once. And some of you here might be thinking, I already know that stuff. But it's not enough that you know. You have to build it, convince others, explain to others, or to illustrate to others. And I found this exercise to be useful. So let's do it. Around each table I want, say, 4 to 6 customers, and all you need is access to pen and paper. And I want one developer who has access to pens. So let's say at each table, one developer and another. I'm not going to harass you with anything. One hand up will be the developer. Okay, everybody want to be a developer? Okay, and we need 4 to 6 customers. So customers hand up. And if you're not a customer, you're going to have to stand up. Only people playing the game get to sit. So customers hand up 4 to 6 per table. Right? Okay? And the rest of you stand up. Because you are observers. Right? So stand up and move a little bit to the side and observe. gets too confusing otherwise. Listen carefully now. This gets a little confusing if you don't get the instructions. So listen very carefully. What we're going to do now is the customers are going to order stuff from the developer, right? And what the customer wants is name on print. That's all. Yeah, I as customer, I can't write letters. I don't know how to write. That's my business need. The developers know how to write letters. So we have a business case, right? And here's the process. Customer, Jeff, and developer. Customer Jeff takes a piece of paper set and just gives it to the developer. I want my name here, right? That's the ordering process. Pretty simple, right? Give it to the developer. Developer writes the name and gives the paper back. That's the delivery process. Are you with me so far? It's not too complicated, right? No slave. And we want to optimize this, so I want you as customer to log with what time did I get my delivery. And the time is in terms of a time limit I'm going to put up on the wall. So you're going to see a big, huge second counter here. Just write down when did I get my name. Because as customer, you want your name as soon as possible. So far, so good? So don't start anything until I have the counter, okay? Now, developers, listen very carefully. My developers hand up again. Listen very carefully. You get fired for this, right? You lose a lot of good developers. We have a policy, don't keep customers waiting. That's bad. So, start early means finish early, obviously. Right? If you start something early, you'll finish early. Right? So, as a developer, here's how it works. You ask all your customers to just give you all the papers they want. Just give them to me. Right? So when the counter starts, all the customers just immediately give the order to the developer. Right? And then as a developer, you take the customers, you rank them from high priority to your left, and then down to right. Right? So you prioritize customers, and you do exactly this. First letter, Dave. But now Lisa's impatient, so I better do some of hers, and I better do a bit of Bob, and a bit of keeping them all happy. Etc. So just left to right, left to right. And of course, customers, you are allowed to tell the developer your name. You communicate verbally. And that's about it, right? And we were finished here, so Dave, right, pass it back to Dave, it's right down the time. So each customer, just wait till you get your thing, and then when you get your name, you write down. That's perfectly 200% clear. And the customer can write numbers, but not letters. The customer has to be able to write those numbers. So let me just spin around here. Right? Keep it. Right? Now we're going to do round 2. And never mind, this is just trying to get to where I was. Now we're going to do round 2. And this is a bit different. So same group, same customer, same developer. Right? This time we have a different policy. So listen up again, developers. Now we have a new policy. So it's like the customers are trying a new company. And you happen to have moved that company too. And this company has another policy, limit work in progress. And their current limit is 1 customer at a time. Right? So that means I'm not allowed to be doing it at the same time. So I have to finish Dave before I get to start Lisa. And then I got to finish Lisa before I get to start Bob. So poor Maria has to wait till everybody else is completely done before she gets anything. In order to do this, we need to add a little bit to our purchasing process. We now have step 0, which is request order. Right? So as customers, you can't get the order on the developer anymore. You can only give the order to a developer when the developer goes like that. Specifically to you. I'm ready for you. Then you can hand your order to the developer, and now you've got to write the start time, because some of you are going to have to wait. So it's interesting to know when you get to hand your order. So hand comes out, and then you just look at the time, 6, and then you do it. Other than that, it's the same, right? You give the product back. And you write the end time, right? And the project length is, of course, the end time minus the start time. So you might call that out. Is that clear? It's a bit more complicated, but I hope you can manage it. No, this time you write the whole thing. The first customer, finish him, then the second customer. Because remember, the policy is 1 customer at a time. And the developer will be allowed to work on 1 customer at a time, or you get fired, right? Remember that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, so wait for the clock.